everybody. This is The Balanced Life. You can listen to our archives at thebalancedlife.com. And this is Tiffany Coulter. I'm glad to see you today. I want to talk about this great book I just finished and actually restarted. It's called Extreme Ownership, and it was written by two Navy SEALs, Jocko Willink. I think his last name is like Willink, but his first name's Jocko, and Leif Babin. I listened to it on Audible over the last 9 days, and I got so much out of it that as soon as the book finished, I jumped back to the beginning and started it again. So I touched chapter 1 as soon as it was ending. And I decided to talk about it today because when I was brainstorming today's podcast, I could not get this book and Darren Hardy's book, The Compound Effect, out of my head. The two were building on each other, and I thought that it might be helpful to my listeners if I shared with you a few nuggets. First, Darren Hardy shared on his Darren Daily video earlier this week that the key to motivation is realizing life owes you nothing. You are not entitled to anything. I've known this, but I think sometimes I forget. I get angry when things don't work out the way I expect them to. It's as if I deserve to have good things and for things to work out whenever I do something. And we all want to have good things happen in our life. But when we feel we deserve it, we can get into kind of like a victim mentality that stops growth and productivity. And that's really the issue. Also, as the book title implies, extreme ownership, or the compound effect rather, our behaviors over time compound and bring us results. So just like compounding interest can result in huge financial gains when we're consistent over time for you or for a bank that has loaned you money, the same is true in your life. Your daily habits over time create your life. So I want to summarize 3 things that I began implementing this week as a result of reading these 2 books. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, which I read a long time ago and just started thinking again about, and Extreme Ownership by the 2 Navy SEALs. In Extreme Ownership, I'm trying to focus on leading through communication. That's one of the chapters. I want to talk about taking extreme ownership and keeping things simple. Those 3 things, because obviously I can't summarize the whole entire book to you in this short podcast. So let me start with simple. We can all create a life and business that's overly complex. This doesn't just mean that we work too much or that our home is cluttered. It's that we don't ever allow ourselves to experience boredom or even downtime. Also, we try to find really elaborate answers to things rather than simple ones. We add things to our lives to simplify them, but the result is actually more complexity. And when I was trying to think of how to illustrate this, I was thinking about something that I heard in my early 20s. It was in a cooking magazine, and it said that women in pioneer days spent nearly as much time as we do now, so as we did when I was in my 20s, cooking meals. The difference is they had to build a fire, haul water, cook, boil, chop, and gather things for the meal like beans, cornbread, chopped vegetables, salt pork. Just like really simple ingredients, but they had to go around and gather them, get them out of their dry cellar, get them, go get water. But now, instead of throwing these things together, if I wanted to make bean soup and cornbread, I could be done and have the stuff cooking in the oven in like 10 minutes if I wanted to. Instead of doing that, using our food pressers, air fryers, pressure cookers, we have taken this time saving available to us to make more and more elaborate meals. We basically just raised our standards instead of enjoying the time savings. We're back to taking an hour to prepare meals. Also, the expectation is that we have to have these super elaborate meals with garnishes and side dishes and this and that we can't meet that standard with just making that simple meal that they used to have. I am very guilty of this. Many days I would love to simply have a salad of greens, cucumbers, chicken breasts, some fresh Parmesan, just like some kind of really simple meal that doesn't take long at all to make. In the winter, I love vegetable soup, salad, a piece of bread. But instead, I will spend an hour chopping, cooking, driving to specialty grocery stores to find different spices and vegetables, searching for recipes we've never had before. Um, Even if I'm making like beans and rice or salad, it has to have some kind of special flair. A simple soup and sandwich somehow isn't complex enough for me to feel like I made a good meal for my family. I had this happen just last week. I told my husband I could have made a really simple meal that would have been just as disappointing as the complex meal I had, because after I made this recipe that I thought was going to be so great, it was actually absolutely horrible. We ate it because we don't like to waste food, but it was horrible. It literally tasted like absolutely nothing. And we have this really funny story of once I was trying to make some kind of Thai dish with a peanut sauce. I spent like an hour trying to make this sauce, mixing all this stuff. And when we finally had it, it tasted exactly like I had put peanut butter on spaghetti noodles. And to this day, we laugh about my peanut butter spaghetti. Um, but we do that. We do the same thing in business. I get completely overwhelmed with work. And so I hire staff to help me. And their help, it like frees me up. And I'm so relaxed. This just happened a month ago. And because I'm relaxed, it frees me up to find more things to do. So now I'm tossing all this stuff over to my staff and they're getting overwhelmed. And I'm just as overwhelmed because I've started up all these other projects instead of focusing on the thing I needed to do and the reason I hired the staff. So instead, I need to evaluate what needs to be done to reach my immediate goal. I need to consider why those are goals and if the goals are good ones or not. And then I need to execute, not take on more. And that's really what I've been trying to do over this last week. Get some things done, get some things off my plate, create some of those revenue generating products, make a simple website to sell them with my new homeschooling website that I'm building, and start to get some things out to people so they can use them, not overly complicate. The next thing that they talked about in extreme ownership is the term extreme ownership. It's recognizing that as the leader, if something goes wrong, it is your fault. So we started out not being a victim, and now we have to realize that when something goes wrong, it's our fault, period. You did not communicate to the person on your team why something needed to be done in a particular way, or you didn't clearly articulate what you wanted. You did not articulate what their role, their task, the role that their task played in the big picture and what the consequences are if it's not done that way. If something wasn't done the way you wanted it done, you either didn't train them well enough or communicate what you needed effectively enough. And while they didn't say this in the book, I feel like if the employee simply doesn't care to do it the way it needs to be done, it's one thing if they really want to help the company and you didn't teach them. But if they really don't care about the company, then it's your fault that the wrong person was hired to do the job. I really feel that this goes back to not taking the role of a victim. As employers, we need to make sure that the vision is articulated to our team and to our bosses. So leadership goes up and leadership goes down, which is another topic in another chapter of the book. I really recommend you read it. I've got a link to buy it on my page. Something I love about this book was its focus on leading, not being a boss. If this sounds kind of odd, I'm sure you've heard it some places, but let me explain what I mean by it. It's because so many people try to be the boss now and so few try to be the leader. Leadership is about setting an example, guiding and mentoring. It's serving the mission of the organization. Bossing is about being in charge. While you hope that the person in charge is a leader, that's not always the case. So that brings me back to communication. They really emphasize the need to communicate the vision and the parts to the team. The men who wrote the book are former Navy SEALs, as I said, but they did not all advocate for the idea of because I said so. They didn't like that mentality. In fact, I was really surprised to see that never comes into play and was actually discouraged. I thought the military was about following orders, but what they said, no, that's not the case. You need to articulate to others what's happening and why so that you can coordinate. It's about coordination. The very first lesson that I applied after finishing this book and restarting it was realizing that if I want to lead my organization effectively and with excellence, the first thing I need to do is make it clear to my team members what I expect. If they don't accomplish it, it's my fault, and I need to try again. I need to keep instructions simple but clear. If my mind is garbled and I keep changing, they will too. They'll be garbled and unclear. And while the book was written about business, I could clearly see these principles applying to every area of my life. My husband, his name's Chris, said that he enjoyed the book and he suggested I read it. But he also said that he had read the same kinds of things in other leadership books. It's the same thing because really there aren't any magical formulas. There are things that work and you have to do them, and you have to do them consistently over a long time, and eventually they'll hit an upward trajectory. It's like the compound effect that I started with. There is no big thing that's going to revolutionize until the little thing revolutionizes the way you're doing it. It's crazy how often I have to remind myself of the basics. I have been so overwhelmed these last 2 weeks, and this just completely reset me. Oh well, I guess we are all going to fail sometimes, even me. Just try to fail forward. I will see you next time.